Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast which we disassemble a film from the Marvel Cinematic Universe into 1-minute segments and then examine it in obsessive and occasionally hilarious detail. I'm Kyle Olson from the Swashbuckling Ladies Debate Society podcast.
Hey, and I'm Rob Cabasco. And Kyle?
Yes, sir.
I know our friends and fans who tune into the show tune in for the great dissection of the MCU. But today, they get a bonus.
Oh, do they?
They get a business class.
Ooh.
And I would like to thank our good friends at the Harvard Business Review. So in December,
we're going to hear from the Harvard
Business Review. Let me tell you,
just lost all of Boston. Sorry.
No, hold on, everybody. We love all of you. Okay, so in December of 2016, an article on HBR.com written by Victoria Luby and Jane Edison Stevenson titled "The 7 Tenets of a Good CEO Succession Process." What are those 7 tenets?
Being David Tennant, but
not David Tennant. No, one N. Two. That's Tennant with 2 N's. That's,
okay, got it.
Never mind. All right. So really quick, what would we consider? What do they consider being writers for the Harvard Business Review? Sure. What would be your defining plan of a good gold standard succession process for your CEO? Number 1, align the board on future CEO profiles that are driven by business strategy.
Business.
Yeah, right. Number 2, assess candidates against industry benchmarks, valid indicators of executive potential, and the CEO profiles you've developed. Sounds time consuming.
Yeah.
Number 3, think 2 to 3 CEO moves ahead. Don't just seek to replace the incumbent. Wow, very proactive. That's very visionary.
Yeah.
Number 4, cross-train generations of CEO successors with a mix of on-the-job training, intensive coaching, mentoring, and education. Number 5, become intimately familiar with the bench of candidates and their potential.
Okay.
Number 6, keep CEO succession as a standing board agenda item since it ensures a multi-layered, multi-generational process. And last but not least, number 7, ensure that your talent management and development planning is linked to your longer-term business strategy. Let's just say Stark Industries, not Apple.
No, Stark Industries is not following almost any of those.
Maybe except for 5.
They do have a plan of succession.
There is a plan. It's not really based on a plan, but
no, because here we are, minute 22 of Iron Man 2 from 2010, directed by Mr. Jon Favreau, and we're still in the middle of the argument. So Pepper and Tony are still going ta-ta-ta back and forth, and so Tony, we ended in the middle of a sentence, and so we're going to pick up where that sentence left off. Another lie. Yes, thanks, Tony. He says, I don't care about the liberal agenda anymore. It's boring. I'm giving you a boring alert. You do it.
Boring alert.
Boring alert. I'm surprised he doesn't have Jarvis have a sound effect that plays when
the light should, every light in the place should flash red.
Yeah, right. Boring alert. Boring alert, sir. So she says, do what? And he says, excellent idea. I just figured this out. You run the company. And so it goes, they banter back and forth. I'm trying to. And then he says, finally, Tony interrupts Pepper and just says, I'm trying to make you CEO. Why won't you let me? And that finally stops her just to be like, wait, what?
She really does a fantastic back, moving back and closing her eyes deeply, and has this great, as the revelation is made clear to her now that, oh no, you actually are being serious. Yeah.
Acting is reacting, and she has a great reaction to this thing. And then she, of course, the first thing she says is, have you been drinking?
Yeah.
And the answer, of course, is chlorophyll.
Which, go ahead. Obviously, this is a callback to the comic.
It is a callback to not only the first Iron Man movie, but also then earlier on today, we found out he's been drinking chlorophyll to try and counteract the palladium poisoning. But I did some research. I'm like, should people eat chlorophyll? Should they? And no one really knows. No. Like, no one's really done a whole lot of research. So you can buy it. You can go to the store and you can buy chlorophyll. Yes, the same stuff that you learned about in science class that keeps plants, makes plants go green.
Photosynthesis.
You can also do it. You can also overdose on chlorophyll and turn yourself partially green. But but one of the things they say now, obviously, we're not scientists, and like all the research I did was 10 minutes on jumping from site to site
on the internet.
On the internet, exactly, because like you're whatever opinion you have, you'll find people to back you up for it on the internet.
Of course.
So one of the things they talk about as a benefit of chlorophyll, though, is for detoxification. So it actually scientifically, maybe junk science, but scientifically, there is a correlation between that. So, I mean, it makes sense that this is what he'd be drinking there. And obviously, Jon Favreau has fully admitted they totally retconned this. Like, they just went, it's chlorophyll. Sure, that's the way in the first one, too. That's totally
look at, as we've talked about, we talked about palladium in catalytic converters in a previous minute. This is a basic concept of photosynthesis, and that taking light, turning it into energy, and one of the byproducts of this is oxygen. That's a clean thing, right?
Sure.
It on its surface, it makes a ton of sense. As you're watching this and trying to get what's going on, it makes sense.
Yeah. And in the same world where a guy takes so much gamma radiation and doesn't die of cancer, but instead turns into a giant green rage monster.
Exactly.
Sure, chlorophyll.
Exactly. This totally makes sense.
So he says, and after once again, Pepper is just still stunned. He says, "I hereby and irrevocably appoint you chairman and CEO of Stark Industries, effective immediately. Done deal." Like, wow, that's the kind of job offer you want to get. I mean, like,
well, especially with irrevocably. Anything that's irrevocable is really nice when it comes to jobs.
That's right. So I was sort of like, I know that like there's always a weird thing back and forth between like the comics inspire the movies, which then inspire the comics, which then inspire the movies. It's like this weird thing. So I'm like, was Pepper ever CEO of Stark Industries in the comics? So I did some research, and she did. It was about almost the same time. So it happened like right before, right around the same time. I couldn't find the exact sort of month, but during, because a lot of stuff happened at the same time, and it doesn't always line up because I don't know if you know this, folks, but comics sometimes ship late. It's true. So it's like when it came out versus when it was written. Who knows? But anyways, so let's take a little comic book digression here. So during Matt Fraction's run, the big bad guy was Obadiah Stane's son. So Obadiah obviously was dead. He killed himself. He killed himself in the comic, as opposed to the same circumstances of the Iron Man 1 thing, except that there was not as much of a mentor relationship. But then he eventually, when he realized he was going to lose, he killed himself rather than face justice. And so now the son is back and trying to take revenge and doing all sorts of stuff. Actually, some of the elements of what he did sort of ended up in Iron Man 3, so we'll talk a little bit about that more. But during this thing, basically he was using Stark technology to turn people into walking suicide bombs. So they would use Stark technology, like basically they would implant themselves with repulsor-esh, like arc reactor tech, and then go to places and explode themselves. So obviously Tony was distraught by that, like incensed by this, and it turned into a whole thing. But one of the times, one of these people actually blew up near Pepper and damaged her, and she was going to die. So Tony had to use the same technology to bring her, like, to save her life. And so she ended up with a arc reactor. I keep saying repulsor. She ended up with an arc reactor in her chest, just like he had. So like he basically used this technology to save her life. And so because of that, then if she had an arc reactor in her chest, then why not a suit? So she eventually, that's where he created a suit for her, and he called it Rescue. And it was actually a suit designed to help people. It had no weapons at all. So there's no little missiles in the shoulders, like he's saying, like no repulsor stuff. It was all just designed to rescue people and to help people. Technically it's still around. I mean, like even in modern comics, there's actually a new 2-issue thing came out this year of Rescue and Pepper Potts running around in her suit helping people. So anyways, back to the CEO thing.
Well, wait, and multiple spoilers there for various future elements of the MCU.
Yes, exactly. So like obviously that quietly gets sort of homaged in Endgame, and then also there's a little bit of it in Iron Man 3 as well. Right. They don't ever flat out say it, but that's pretty much what it is, and it came from this. So during Secret Invasion, Which, I'm sorry, we're already digressing. I'm going to have to go on Kevin Smith.
There's not a whole lot more to this minute, everybody. So we can digress a little bit. Trust us. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about Secret Invasion. So Secret Invasion was the Skrulls. So we all know the Skrulls now because we've all seen Captain Marvel, I'm assuming. Skrulls are a shape-shifting alien race. Now, in the comic books, they are full-on capital E evil. Like that was one of the sort of surprises of Captain Marvel, is that when they played they played them as refugees who were like had a losing side of the battle and trying to survive. That is not how they've ever been portrayed before. They are super sneaky, manipulative, and they started many wars. Like they have always been the bad guys. So they decided that because their planet got blown up by, oh geez, I can't remember. Let's say the Phoenix, because that's usually what happens. They decided they needed a planet, so they picked Earth. So rather than coming in with warships and everything, they decided, hey, why don't we just take it over quietly, one by one? So they started replacing people. So during Secret Invasion, it turns out that a lot of the heroes that we've been watching for the last couple of things have actually been Skrulls for many years. They have like Hank Pym turned out was a Skrull. I mean, like all these, they had a big battle in Japan, and Elektra got killed. Elektra turned out to have been a Skrull, and so everybody started doubting everybody else, and it even got to a point where a ship crashed down in the Savage Land, and it opened up and outpoured about a dozen heroes from the Silver Age. So there's Iron Man and Captain America, and so everybody went, wait, are those the originals, and they've actually been held captive this whole time, or are they duplicates trying to confuse us? It turned into a whole thing. It turns out a bit of both. But during this whole thing, the Skrulls basically, it turns out they had infiltrated governments. They had infiltrated all these things. They were everywhere, and nobody could trust anyone. So they basically said, "Hey, you've already been conquered. You just don't know it yet. We've been here this whole time, and we've actually been running things. By the way, there's no armies marching down the street. Like, we're already in control. So embrace change." That was their catchphrase. And he loves you. That was because basically their god was like a god of love, and basically want everyone to be one nation under Skrull rule. So Tony got blamed for this because he was like I think he was running Shield at the time and was like celebrity number one. So he got blamed for this. So he's like, okay, so I am like radioactive now, and I need to be away. So Pepper, you're in charge. I'm out of here. And so he's like, okay, your first job, shut down Stark Industries before anybody else can come here and pillage it and take it over. Because at the time, I think it was Norman Osborn was running what Shield had become, which he of course renamed Hammer. No connection to Justin Hammer.
Oh, interesting.
So her job was basically shut it down so he doesn't get all my armors.
Right.
So yes, she did get to become CEO at that point, but it was kind of under crappy circumstances. This is a much better way to get the job.
Well, and it clearly is not a spare of the moment decision on Tony's part. I mean, in any way, this continues the lie of one that it's presented as if like, oh yeah, I'm just doing this off the cuff. I just thought of it. And I think it is kind of funny where he says, there's one part here where he says, look, I've given this a fair amount of thought. And then lo and behold, there's the champagne, being brought by, was it you? Oh, you is the robot. You. Yeah. Clearly this has all been planned. I mean, and again, this is part of, as we're already now, we're in almost 25 minutes of the movie. Yeah. We're understanding Tony is really dealing with his mortality. Yeah. And yes, this is something he's thought through and he's already planned it out. And here we are.
Yeah. So doing a fair amount of headhunting, so to speak, trying to figure out who a worthy successor would be. At this point, John Debney's score comes in because it had been silent all the way through. And it's a track called Making Pepper CEO. Sometimes you just got to say what it is. So there's you. So obviously he had planned this whole thing out. He was going to tell her that time, whatever, because there was you with the champagne. Like, this was all so even a lot of stuff he said over the last couple minutes were not true. He was just winding her up because he was about to give her, the greatest job ever.
I think you're also seeing this as we talked about succession plans. This is actually part of like your final test, right? Like, I'd hope you be ticked off about what I did with the modern art collection. I'd hope that you'd be willing to get in my face and fight, because anyone who's a good business leader, you want to have dissenting voices in your inner circle, or else bad things happen.
bringing it back to Aaron Sorkin, actually, he's in Sports Night. He has a great quote that Robert Guillaume says, where it says about when he's talking about being a good leader, and he says, "If you're dumb, surround yourself with smart people. If you're smart, surround yourself with smart people who disagree with you."
Toby.
Yeah, I always love that.
That'll be another the West Wing theme will roll in right there.
Oh, West Wing Weekly has its own podcast, which just recently concluded. They don't need any more love from us, except it's a fantastic podcast and everyone should listen to it.
Exactly.
So then Tony says something extremely important. I know we've been wandering all over the place today, but like now, here it is. This is what you need to focus in on. He says, when he's talking about making the decision, he says, "And then I realized it's you. It's always been you." And that is a crucial line because he will say that exact same thing into a helmet in deep space when he believed he was dying. So once again, he's believing he's dying here, he's dying there, and what he's thinking about is Pepper. Because that's the same thing he says in Avengers Endgame. Nice. That's some nice work, guys.
Yeah, that is. No, yeah. and I think even shows, as much as we're going to continue to talk about.
Oh, I'm saying, by the way, guys, not being sexist, I'm saying guys to the screenwriters.
Of course. Part of this, and I really do think we're going to touch on this, is that I think Tony, yes, he's had a very rambunctious past and philandering
and
all
present.
Stuff. And present too, I understand, but I do think his heart is with Pepper, and you can see it in this minute for sure, and you'll see it again in successive minutes.
Yeah,
it's an act. It's an act to try to enrage her so that she will fall.
So he'll get hit with the surprise.
Yes.
So he continues on. He says, "I thought there'd be a legal, but we don't know what, because that's where the minute comes to an end.
Legal alert. Legal alert.
Yeah, something legal. Always happens like this is where the minute comes to. You never know where the minute's going to come to an end. It's going to be right there.
Speaking of legal things, if you have questions about law or the legal matters, right? Do you know one place you should not go to get answers?
Where?
Facebook.
True. However, if you want questions answered about this podcast or even Marvel stuff, Facebook's a great place to go. But if only, Rob, there was some place they could go that wouldn't just be lost in all the mess of Facebook, that they could focus in on this show and the things we're doing here and other Next Reel shows. If only there were a place like that.
There is.
There is?
Yes.
Where is it?
I believe it's the Next Reel Film Podcast Executive Lounge. Think of it as your own personal MCU law library.
Ooh, very nice. So be back here for minute 23 to find out what this legal situation is. Enough said.
Bye.